Hey everybody, it's Andy, and welcome back to my office in Modesto, California. I'm an attorney licensed to practice law in California as well as New York. In this video, I'm going to go over two reimbursement credits that are really common in California divorce cases. So the basic kind of background, I guess, or kind of the scenario, I suppose, in which you as a divorce kind of litigant, like as a spouse who's going through a divorce, the scenario in which you might encounter these credits is basically something like this. So I have a whole bunch of videos on my channel about community property, what it is, the problems that you encounter with, applying it in the real world. I'll link that up over here. But the idea basically is that when you have community property and there's you guys separate, for example, the spouses separate, you're going through a divorce, the divorce isn't done yet. Let me put it this way. The bills don't stop just because you guys broke up, let's say. So after the divorce is over, hopefully you guys have split up your property and all the debts are assigned and so forth. And each spouse is going to be responsible for whatever debts the court says. During that kind of gray period, like a year, let's say, the divorce isn't done yet, but you guys aren't really speaking to each other. Who pays the debts? There's going to be credit card bills and mortgage debts that have to get paid and so forth. So one spouse might just kind of take it upon themselves to continue paying the mortgage, for example, even though they're not quite sure that they're going to actually get the house after the divorce is basically done. They might get some of it, but they're not, I guess, they have to assume, I guess, that all the money that they're paying on the mortgage is not for naught, I suppose. So hopefully that makes sense. So the idea then is that there's going to be a whole bunch of reimbursement, I guess, that possibly might need to get done. All the money that spouse paid on the mortgage, maybe they'll get reimbursed for part of that because the house is community property. So the two credits that are really common in California divorce cases are Watts credits, W-A-T-T-S, I'll write that here, and Epstein credits. That's the name of the case. So the thing is, there are two cases in California. One of them is called Watts, Marriage of Watts, and the other one is called Marriage of Epstein. So those two credits are really common. There's another credit that I personally don't encounter that often. It's called a Jeffries credit. There's a case called Marriage of Jeffries also. I won't write that here, but I'll link it down below for you if I can find a Google Scholar link, let's say. So Watts and Epstein are what I'm going to go over here because those, at least in my experience, are the most common. So a Watts credit. A Watts credit basically is, think of it like rent. I suppose it's probably the best way to put it. So let's say, for example, that, I guess there's a community asset of some kind, like a house. And let's say that after separation, but before the divorce is finalized, before it's finally determined who owns that house, let's say that, one spouse stays in the house and he or she has exclusive use of the house. So for example, husband, wife, and let's say that husband moves out, even though the house is still in his name, wife lives there on her own the entire time, the entire year or so that it takes for a divorce, to actually be done. So basically, during that year, you can think of it like, okay, well, the wife is basically renting the house from the husband. So the thing is, the husband would have a Watts credit for the wife's exclusive use of that house during that time. Again, because the house is community property, he owns part of it, she is using all of it, let's say. I don't mean to kind of say the genders that way. Could be the reverse too. Could be, husband number one stays in the house, husband number two moves out. A reimbursement credit, like a Watts credit, would still apply. Wife could move out, husband could stay in the house, wife would have the Epstein credit also. It's not gender specific that way. So again, Watts credit would be a reimbursement due to one of the spouses because the other spouse has exclusive use of community property. So that's the Watts credit. The second credit is, like I said, is going to be the Epstein credit. So the Epstein credit is, think of it like reimbursement. So if we continue with the house example, let's say, so the Epstein credit is going to be the community debt paid for with separate property money. I forget if I mentioned it in this video, but I have a video on data separation also, which I'll kind of link up over here. So the data separation in California is important because that's when community property rights end. It's also important because by statute in California, which I'll link down below, by statute in California, any money earned after, not just money, I guess, compensation, any type of, compensation earned after the date of separation is also separate property. So let's assume, for instance, that husband and wife basically split up, they're going through a divorce. Husband, again, moves out, but, wife continues to pay the mortgage all on her own, let's say. Husband doesn't pay the mortgage at all. So if wife is paying the mortgage entirely on her own, again, the house is community property. So theoretically, like, both parties should pay for the the expenses together. However, because the husband's moved out and husband's not paying a dime on the mortgage, the wife has to pay for all of it herself, but he owns part of the house, so therefore she's not going to pay for him, without reimbursement. So that's the Epstein credit. So the husband would have to reimburse the wife for the Epstein credit for the mortgage that she's paid for post separation. Again, her separate property. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. It's actually not a complicated concept, either of these. Watts and Epstein, they're not complicated. And they're really common, but it's something where, I guess, like describing it probably is a little, let me back up. Describing it by name, rather, probably is a little complicated. If you describe it out in words, it's really not that complicated. So again, to kind of summarize, a Watts credit, think of it like rent, when one spouse has exclusive use of the community asset during the kind of post-separation, pre-divorce period. An Epstein credit basically would be reimbursement for expenses expenses on a community asset that one spouse used, separate property money to pay for. So a while back in one of my videos, I went over community property and separate property. I told you guys that the concept is not difficult. The application of it can be quite confusing, though, which I think based on this video, it might be a little bit confusing. The problem with community property, one of many perhaps, is that it's a simple concept, but it affects everything. And Watts credits, Epstein credits, that's one reason, that's one thing rather, that they actually apply to, or Watts credits and Epstein credits are one thing that community property as a principle applies to. It's confusing possibly. So just, hopefully you can watch this video again, leave me a comment, share, subscribe, etc. And hopefully that helps you. So anyway, I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Thanks.